The first snow of December drifted softly past the kitchen window as Emma Carter adjusted the hem of the red velvet dress spread carefully across her dining table. Tiny silver snowflakes, stitched by hand, shimmered under the yellow light of the lamp. She ran her fingers over the fabric one last time, smoothing out every crease, her chest tightening with both pride and worry. "Mommy, is it ready?" Lily's small voice called from the hallway. Emma looked up and smiled as her 8-year-old daughter came skipping into the room, her dark curls bouncing. Her wide hazel eyes landed on the dress, and her face lit up like Christmas morning itself. "It's beautiful," Lily gasped. Emma laughed softly. "You haven't even tried it on yet." Lily gently picked it up, holding it against herself. "Grandma and Grandpa are going to love it." The words made Emma's smile falter for just a second. She wished she could believe that. The invitation had arrived 2 weeks earlier in a cream-colored envelope embossed with gold lettering. "The Whitmores request your presence for Christmas Eve dinner at the family estate." No warm message, no personal note. Just the formal command that had always defined her parents. Emma had stared at it for nearly an hour before deciding to accept. For Lily, her daughter had never spent Christmas Eve with Emma's side of the family. Every year, Emma found an excuse to avoid it: a fever, a work obligation, car trouble. The truth was simpler. She couldn't bear exposing Lily to the cold judgment she had endured her entire childhood. But this year, Lily had overheard the phone call. "Are we really going to Grandma's big house?" she'd asked, excitement sparkling in her eyes. Emma had hesitated. Her parents were wealthy, polished, and obsessed with appearances. Their sprawling estate looked like something out of a holiday magazine, complete with crystal chandeliers, towering trees, and catered dinners. To an 8-year-old, it must have sounded magical, and maybe, just maybe, Emma had let herself hope that time had softened them. Maybe becoming grandparents had changed them. Maybe Christmas could mend what years had broken. Now, standing in her modest kitchen, she folded the dress carefully and placed it in a gift box. "Go try it on," she said. Minutes later, Lily twirled into the room wearing the dress, her cheeks glowing. Emma's breath caught. The dress fit perfectly. The rich red fabric made Lily look like a little Christmas angel. "You look beautiful," Emma whispered. Lily grinned. "Do you think Grandma will like it?" Emma forced another smile. "Of course," but doubt gnawed at her. Christmas Eve arrived wrapped in icy wind. Emma drove carefully through falling snow, her hands tight on the steering wheel as Lily hummed carols in the passenger seat. The Whitmore estate appeared at the end of the long driveway like a glowing palace. White lights covered every tree, and giant wreaths hung from the stone pillars. "Wow," Lily breathed. Emma parked and turned to her daughter. "Remember to stay close to me, okay?" Lily nodded, clutching the small wrapped box in her lap. Inside was the handmade gift she had spent weeks making for her grandparents, a tiny wooden nativity scene, each figure carefully painted by hand. Emma had helped sand the edges, but every brushstroke was Lily's. She'd worked on it every evening after school, determined to make something special enough for Grandma. The thought made Emma's stomach twist. The front door opened before they could knock. Her mother, Victoria Whitmore, stood there in an emerald silk gown, diamonds glittering at her throat. Her eyes swept over Emma in her simple navy dress, then landed on Lily. "Well," she said coolly, "you're late." "It's 7 exactly," Emma replied. Victoria ignored her and frowned at Lily's dress. "That's homemade, isn't it?" Emma felt heat rise to her face. "I made it for her. How quaint." Lily looked down at her skirt, her smile wavering. Before Emma could respond, her father, Richard, appeared behind Victoria. Come in," he said briskly. "Everyone's already here." The grand foyer buzzed with voices. Emma's older sister, Claire, stood by the staircase wearing a designer gown, champagne glass in hand. Her two daughters, dressed in matching white fur-trimmed dresses, looked like they'd stepped out of a department store catalog. Claire's lips curved into a smug smile. Well, look who finally decided to join us. Her eyes drifted to Lily. Oh, how creative. Did your school make that dress? A few nearby relatives chuckled. Emma's jaw tightened. Lily instinctively moved closer to her mother. Then Claire's youngest daughter, Sophie, pointed at Lily's wrapped gift. What's that? Another craft project? More laughter. Lily's fingers tightened around the box. Emma knelt beside her. It's okay, she whispered, but as she looked into her daughter's shining eyes, she saw the first flicker of hurt. And deep inside, a familiar dread began to grow. Christmas Eve had only just begun. The Whitmore dining room glowed beneath the soft light of two crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across polished silver and delicate china. The 20-foot Christmas tree in the corner sparkled with imported glass ornaments, each one chosen by Victoria to match the room's gold and ivory theme. Everything was flawless, expensive, and painfully calculated. Emma sat stiffly at the far end of the long mahogany table, Lily beside her. The seating arrangement had not gone unnoticed. Claire and her family sat close to Richard and Victoria at the center of the table, where conversation and laughter flowed easily. Emma and Lily had been placed near the end, almost like an afterthought. Lily's little hands rested neatly in her lap, but Emma could see the nervous tapping of her fingers. The teasing in the foyer had already dimmed her excitement. Emma reached under the table and gave her hand a reassuring squeeze. Across from them, Claire smirked as she sipped her wine. So, Emma, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear, are you still working at that little community library? Emma looked up. Yes, how sweet. Claire tilted her head. I suppose someone has to do charity work. Several relatives laughed softly. Emma's stomach tightened. It's not charity work. She replied evenly, it's my job. Claire gave a fake smile. Of course, Victoria gracefully set down her fork, and Lily, dear, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness, what school are you attending these days? Maple Grove Elementary. Lily answered politely. Victoria exchanged a glance with Claire. Oh, public school. The words landed like an insult. Claire's oldest daughter, Madison, smirked. We go to St. Catherine's Academy. It's very exclusive. Lily blinked. Oh, Madison leaned back in her chair. We're performing the Nutcracker this year. Only the best students get selected. Lily lowered her eyes. Emma's chest tightened. Her daughter loved ballet, but lessons were expensive. Emma had done what she could, online tutorials, practicing in their living room, pirouettes across worn hardwood floors. Still, she knew what this conversation was designed to do, humiliate. The dinner dragged on with subtle jabs wrapped in polished smiles. Victoria criticized Emma's simple necklace. Richard made a dismissive comment about single mothers and their endless struggles. Claire laughed about some people lacking ambition. Each remark was aimed carefully, like tiny cuts designed to bleed slowly. Through it all, Lily stayed quiet. Then dessert was cleared, and Victoria clapped her hands. Now for gifts, she announced. A servant began distributing elegant wrapped boxes to the children. Madison and Sophie squealed over diamond charm bracelets. Other grandchildren received tablets, designer accessories, and expensive toys. When it was Lily's turn, the servant handed her a small, thin envelope. Lily opened it carefully. Inside was a $10 bookstore gift card. Emma froze. Every other grandchild had received lavish presents worth hundreds. Lily stared at the card, confusion flickering across her face. Thank you, she whispered politely. Victoria smiled thinly. Books suit your circumstances better. Claire snorted into her wineglass. Emma's fingers curled into fists beneath the table. Then Lily straightened. Can I give my present now? She asked softly. Victoria raised an eyebrow. If you must. Lily carefully picked up the wrapped box she had been guarding all evening and walked to the center of the room. Her cheeks were pink with nervousness. I made this for Grandma and Grandpa, she said. Emma held her breath. Lily slowly removed the wrapping paper. The hand-painted nativity scene gleamed under the chandelier light. Each tiny figure had been painted with extraordinary care. The baby Jesus in soft gold, Mary in pale blue, Joseph in earthy brown. Even the little wooden sheep had tiny white curls brushed onto them. For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Then Victoria laughed, a sharp, cold laugh. Oh my! Claire leaned forward and burst into giggles. It looks like something from a kindergarten yard sale. The room erupted in scattered laughter. Richard picked up one of the figures between two fingers as if it were dirty. What exactly is this supposed to be? A nativity set, Lily whispered. Victoria wrinkled her nose. The paint is uneven. And look at this donkey, Claire added. It's crooked. Madison laughed openly. It looks weird. Emma felt something inside her crack. Stop it, she said sharply, but Victoria was already standing. She set the nativity figure down with exaggerated care and looked directly at Lily. Darling, gifts should reflect quality. If one cannot afford something proper, sometimes it's better not to give anything at all. The words hit like a slap. Lily's face went pale. Her small hands trembled. Emma pushed back her chair, fury rising in her throat, but before she could speak, Lily quietly bent to gather the tiny figures. Her eyes shimmered with tears she refused to let fall. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned and walked straight to Grandpa Richard. She leaned close to his ear, and in a trembling whisper, she said something so quiet that no one else could hear. Whatever it was made the color drain from his face. His expression changed instantly, from detached amusement to stunned disbelief. He stared at his granddaughter, as if seeing her for the very first time. Then, without saying a word, he slowly rose from his chair and walked toward the staircase. The room fell silent, and for the first time that evening, Victoria looked uneasy. The silence that followed Richard Whitmore's sudden departure felt heavier than the winter storm raging outside. No one moved, no one spoke. The only sound was the faint crackling of the fireplace and the distant ticking of the antique grandfather clock in the hall. Victoria recovered first. She let out a brittle laugh and adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist. Well, she said lightly, though her voice carried an edge of irritation, your grandfather does have a flair for theatrics. Claire smirked, lifting her champagne glass. Perhaps Lily's artwork overwhelmed him. A few nervous chuckles followed, but they quickly died. Emma knelt beside Lily, who still clutched the tiny painted nativity figures against her chest. Her daughter's face was pale, but her eyes were calm, far calmer than Emma expected. What did you say to him? Emma whispered. Lily hesitated, then looked toward the staircase. I just told him what you always tell me. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Before Lily could answer, heavy footsteps echoed above them. Every head turned. Richard Whitmore descended the staircase slowly, one hand gripping the polished oak railing, the other carrying a thick leather folder. He looked older somehow, not physically, but as though the weight of years had suddenly settled onto his shoulders. Gone was the distant, polished expression he had worn all evening. In its place was something raw, regret. He crossed the room without speaking and stopped at the head of the table. Victoria's smile tightened. Richard, honestly, must we create a scene? He ignored her. Instead, his eyes landed on Lily. Would you repeat what you whispered to me, sweetheart?" The room stilled. Lily looked uncertain but nodded. Her small voice was soft. "I said, Mommy always tells me that Christmas isn't about expensive presents. It's about making people feel loved, and I asked if maybe my gift wasn't good enough because I made it with love instead of money." The words landed like thunder. Emma's breath caught. Across the room, Claire's smile vanished. Richard closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were shining. "That," he said quietly, "is exactly what your mother used to say when she was your age." Emma stared at him. He looked at her for a long moment, his expression filled with something she had never seen directed at her before. "Shame, I remember one Christmas," he said, his voice growing stronger. Emma was 8 years old. "She made Victoria and me a pair of hand-painted ornaments. She spent weeks on them." Emma's chest tightened as the memory resurfaced. She had painted tiny winter birds on glass ornaments using trembling little hands. She had been so proud until her mother had laughed and called them childish. Richard's jaw clenched. "And I said nothing." Victoria straightened sharply. "Richard, this is absurd." "No," he snapped, his voice cracking like a whip. The room froze. Richard Whitmore had never raised his voice, not once. He placed the leather folder on the table and opened it. "For years I told myself silence was peace," he said. "I convinced myself that allowing cruelty was easier than confronting it." He looked at Emma. "And because of that cowardice, I let my daughter spend her life believing she was never enough." Emma's eyes burned. Victoria's face flushed crimson. "This is highly inappropriate." Richard ignored her again. "Months ago," he said, removing several legal documents, "I met with my attorney." Claire leaned forward, confusion spreading across her features. "What are those?" "My revised will." The words hit the room like a shockwave. Victoria's face went white. Claire's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the floor. "What?" she gasped. Richard's expression hardened. "For years, I planned to divide my estate equally between Emma and Claire." Claire visibly relaxed. Then Richard continued, "But after witnessing repeated cruelty, manipulation, and greed from members of this family," his eyes fixed coldly on Victoria and Claire, "I changed my mind." Victoria stepped forward. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I am." He lifted the final document. "The Whitmore estate, all financial holdings, and the family trust will pass solely to Emma Carter and her daughter, Lily, upon my death." A collective gasp rippled through the room. Claire stumbled backward. "That's impossible." Victoria's voice rose to a shriek. "She has done nothing to deserve that." Richard turned to her with icy calm. "That is precisely why she deserves it." The room fell deathly silent. Emma felt as though the floor had disappeared beneath her. "Dad," she whispered. He looked at her, his voice softening. "You spent your whole life asking for nothing while giving everything. Tonight, your daughter reminded me of the truth I should have defended decades ago." Then he turned toward Lily and knelt before her. From his pocket, he withdrew a small silver key. "This is the key to the cedar chest in my study," he said, placing it in her hand. "Inside is something I've been saving for the person who understands what family really means." Lily looked down at the key, confused. Richard smiled gently. "And after tonight, I know exactly who that person is." Across the room, Victoria's perfectly composed world was beginning to collapse. And for the first time in Emma's life, she realized Christmas justice had finally arrived. For several long seconds, no one in the Whitmore dining room dared to breathe. The storm outside howled against the tall windows, rattling the glass as if nature itself had paused to witness the collapse of Victoria Whitmore's perfect Christmas Eve. Victoria stood frozen, her face drained of color, her manicured fingers gripping the edge of the dining table so tightly her knuckles had turned white. "This is insanity," she finally hissed. Claire recovered next, her voice rising with panic. "Dad, you can't do this." This has to be some kind of joke. Richard slowly stood, his expression calm but immovable. It is no joke. Claire laughed sharply, but the sound cracked with desperation. You're letting a child manipulate you over some ridiculous little craft project. At that, Lily instinctively tightened her hold on the wooden nativity figures. Emma moved closer to her daughter, wrapping a protective arm around her shoulders. Richard's eyes narrowed. No, he said evenly, I am finally refusing to let this family's cruelty continue. Victoria straightened, her voice turning cold and commanding. Richard, think carefully. You are embarrassing us in front of everyone. A bitter smile crossed his face. Embarrassing you? He gestured toward Lily. You mocked an 8-year old child for offering a gift she made with love. If anyone should feel embarrassed tonight, it is you. The room remained silent. Several relatives lowered their eyes. No one defended Victoria. No one defended Claire. For the first time, the polished image of the Whitmore family was cracking wide open. Richard turned to Emma. There's something else. He gently nodded toward Lily's silver key. Go open the cedar chest. Emma hesitated, still overwhelmed. Lily looked up at her with wide eyes. Together, mother and daughter climbed the staircase to Richard's study. The room smelled faintly of cedar wood and old books. Near the fireplace sat a carved wooden chest, polished to a soft shine with age. Emma knelt and inserted the key. The lock clicked open. Inside lay dozens of carefully wrapped packages, bundles of letters tied with ribbon, and on top, a small framed photograph. Emma picked it up. It was a picture of herself at 8 years old, standing beside Richard in front of a Christmas tree. In her hands were the painted ornaments she had made so many years ago. Tears blurred her vision. Beneath the photo was an envelope addressed in Richard's handwriting. For Emma and Lily, when the time is right. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside was a letter. Emma, I failed you when you were a child. I saw your kindness, your strength, your beautiful heart, and I allowed others to diminish it because I lacked the courage to stand against them. I kept every gift you ever made me, every ornament, every drawing, every handmade card. They reminded me of what truly matters, even when I was too weak to say it aloud. Tonight your daughter gave me the courage I should have had years ago. Everything in this chest belongs to you, both family heirlooms, savings bonds, and the deed transfer papers for the lake house. It was always meant for the person who understood that love cannot be measured in money. Emma pressed the letter to her chest and wept. Lily gently touched her arm. Mommy, Emma smiled through tears. He believed in us. When they returned downstairs, the room was tense with anger. Victoria was arguing furiously with Richard. You're throwing away this family's future. No, Richard replied calmly. I'm saving it. Emma stepped forward holding the letter. Her voice was steady. We don't want revenge. Victoria scoffed. Then decline it. Emma looked at her mother for a long moment. For years, she had longed for approval that would never come. And suddenly, she felt nothing but peace. This was never about money. Emma said quietly it was about being seen. She turned to Richard. Thank you. Lily then walked to the center of the room. Still holding her nativity set, she carefully placed it on the dining table. It can stay here, she said softly. Victoria stared at her, confused. Why? Lily gave a small smile. So every Christmas, you can remember what Christmas is really supposed to mean. The innocence of her words struck harder than any insult ever could. Victoria's face crumpled not with tears, but with humiliation. Claire said nothing, neither had any response. Outside, the snow fell softly, blanketing the estate in white. Richard placed an arm around Emma and Lily. Come, he said warmly, let's start this Christmas over. They moved to the sitting room where the fire burned bright. Hot chocolate was poured. Old family stories were shared. For the first time in Emma's life, Christmas felt warm. As midnight approached, Richard knelt beside Lily and smiled. "You gave an old man the courage to do the right thing." Lily tilted her head. "All I did was tell the truth." Richard laughed softly. "Sometimes, sweetheart, that's the bravest revenge of all." And as Emma looked at her daughter's glowing face beside the firelight, she realized the sweetest revenge wasn't humiliation. It was healing, it was love. And on that Christmas Eve, love had finally won.